There is one name in Star Wars that every fan has heard but few understand. A name that flashes across Attack of the Clones then disappears into mystery. A name tied to the creation of the Clone Army and the fall of the Jedi. That name is Syfo Dyas. Most fans walked out of the theatre confused. Who was he? Why did he order the clones? And why did the Jedi Council talk about him like an afterthought? For decades that mystery has haunted the saga, like a puzzle piece that was never placed. And yet the more you look at it, the more you realise how important he really is. Because without Syfo Dyas, there is no clone army. Without the clone army, there is no Order 66. And without Order 66, there is no Empire. His story is not just a loose thread. It is the very foundation of the tragedy we all know. What makes it even more compelling is how little we actually know. Was he a visionary who saw the war coming? Was he a pawn of the Sith? Or was he a tragic fool who tried to save the Republic but doomed it instead? The lack of answers makes his shadow loom even larger. And if Star Wars has taught us anything, it is that the past matters. The choices of one person can reshape the destiny of an entire galaxy. Syfo Dyas proves that better than almost anyone, and yet his story remains untold. In this video, we are going to explore why Star Wars desperately needs to tell the backstory of Syfo Dyas, how it could reframe the entire Clone Wars, and why this one forgotten Jedi might be the missing piece of the saga's greatest tragedy. Syfo Dyas is one of those names that has floated around Star Wars lore like a ghost. He is mentioned briefly in Attack of the Clones as the Jedi who supposedly commissioned the Clone Army. Then his name pops up in the Clone Wars arc that reveals a little more about his fate. But beyond that, he remains one of the biggest mysteries in the saga. And that is wild considering his decision, or at least the one attached to his name, shaped the entire future of the galaxy. Think about it. The entire Clone Wars, Order 66, the fall of the Jedi, the rise of the Empire. All of it hinged on this one Jedi Master who barely got any screen time. If that does not scream missed opportunity, I do not know what does. Imagine if the movies had actually explored who he was, why he acted, and whether he was a pawn or a prophet. His story could have added layers of tragedy, intrigue and suspense to the prequels. The official lore tells us that Syfo Dyas foresaw a massive conflict coming. He believed the Republic would need a grand army to survive. The Jedi Council dismissed his warnings, seeing him as too extreme, or perhaps too reckless. And that is where Palpatine stepped in, manipulating events so that Syfo Dyas' commission became the perfect cover for his own plot. That alone makes Syfo Dyas fascinating. Because unlike the rest of the Council, he might have actually been right about the danger looming on the horizon. But the tragedy is that we never get to know how much he knew. Was he aware that Sith were pulling the strings? Did he realise the Republic he was trying to protect was already rotten from the inside? Or was he simply a visionary whose foresight was corrupted and weaponised against the Jedi? That ambiguity is what makes his backstory so crucial. Without it, we are left guessing at whether he was a hero, a fool, or something in between. It is also telling that his name almost sounds like a mistake. George Lucas has admitted that in early drafts the name was closer to Sidious, and fans have speculated about whether the confusion was intentional. That meta layer alone is worth exploring in story form because it plays into the idea that Syfo Dyas was always overshadowed by the Dark Lord who twisted his legacy. He is almost a ghost note in the symphony of Palpatine's rise. From a storytelling perspective, Syfo Dyas offers something Star Wars desperately needs. A look into how the Jedi failed, not because they were corrupted by war, but because they ignored one of their own. We talk all the time about how the Council was blind, but here is a perfect example of them being given a chance to see and turning away. That is not just dramatic, it is damning. And it raises questions about how much the Council really valued individuality. If a Jedi Master had a vision that conflicted with the group, did they ever take it seriously? Or did they silence it because it was inconvenient? Syfo Dyas might represent all the times the Jedi ignored warning signs simply because they did not fit their worldview. And that makes his story incredibly relevant to the themes of Star Wars. Even the Clone Wars arc that touched on him feels more like a teaser than a full exploration. We learn about his death, his ship crash, and the Sith's cover-up, but it is all in service of moving the plot along, not fleshing him out as a character. He is treated like a mystery box, rather than a man. And that is the problem. Because without understanding who he was, we cannot fully understand the tragedy of the Clone Wars. Syfo Dyas deserves to be more than a footnote. He deserves to be the missing piece that shows how the Republic and the Jedi were manipulated into their own destruction. And until we see that story, told Star Wars will always feel like it skipped a crucial chapter. Let's imagine what a proper Syfo Dyas backstory could actually look like. To start, you would need to show him as a complex character, not just a plot device. Maybe he is a Jedi with visions that terrify him. Maybe he feels the weight of inevitability pressing down on him like the galaxy itself is warning him of collapse. You could frame him almost like Cassandra from Greek mythology, cursed to see disaster coming, but never believed. That angle alone would make him one of the most tragic Jedi in canon. Now place him against the Jedi Council. The same council that ignored Qui-Gon's instincts about Anakin. The same council that distrusted Ahsoka. Imagine Syfo Dyas standing before them, insisting that the Republic is vulnerable, that a war is coming, and that they need an army. And imagine the council brushing him off as paranoid. That tension would not just make for good drama, it would also deepen our understanding of why the Jedi failed. But here is where things get interesting. What if Palpatine, or even Dooku, saw in Syfo Dyas the perfect opportunity? A Jedi who could be nudged into making a decision that would later be used to justify everything. We already know that Dooku was directly involved in his death and the Kamino Commission. But what if Syfo Dyas actually thought he was doing the right thing? That makes the whole thing 10 times more tragic because it means the galaxy's darkest age was born out of a Jedi's attempt to protect it. Picture a series or film that shows Syfo Dyas wrestling with visions of galactic war. Maybe he dreams of fleets clashing, of Jedi falling, and of cities burning. He cannot shake it, and he becomes obsessed with preventing it. The Council thinks he is unstable, but he believes he has no choice but to act. That desperation could be the perfect entry point into the story, because it shows us how fear and foresight can be manipulated by the Sith. And then you connect it to Kamino, the mystery planet hidden in the archives wiped from the records. How did Syfo Dyas even find it? Who helped him make the arrangements? Was there already corruption within the Senate feeding him information? These are the kinds of questions that a backstory could answer, and they would reframe how we view the prequels. Because suddenly the clone army does not just appear out of nowhere. It becomes the tragic legacy of a Jedi who was trying to save the Republic. Another angle is to explore how the clones themselves viewed this mysterious figure. Did they even know his name? Was he remembered in Kaminoan records as the client who ordered their existence? Imagine a scene where Rex or Cody learns about Syfo Dyas and realizes the war they fought was born from one Jedi's vision. That is the kind of storytelling that gives depth to both the clones and the Jedi. It would also be fascinating to explore his relationships with other Jedi. Did he confide in anyone? Did he argue with Yoda or Mace Windu? Did he clash with Dooku before Dooku left the Order? These personal connections would make his story more than just a prequel. Mystery, they would make it a character drama with real emotional stakes. And most importantly, a Syfo Dyas story would give us a rare chance to see the Jedi before the Clone Wars in more detail. Not the Order fighting in battlefields, but the Order in decline, quietly ignoring the cracks forming under them. His story could be the bridge between the political rot of the Republic and the outright collapse of the Jedi. That is why his backstory matters. It is not just about answering a trivia question, it is about recontextualizing the fall of the Jedi in a way that makes it even more tragic. Because if they had listened to him, things might have gone differently. Or maybe they would have gone wrong in an entirely new way. Either way, it is a story worth telling. The bigger reason we need a Syfo Dyas backstory is what it would mean for the saga as a whole. Star Wars thrives on themes of destiny choice and manipulation, and Syfo Dyas sits right at the crossroads of all three. His decision to commission the clones is either a noble sacrifice gone wrong, or the ultimate example of Jedi blindness. Either interpretation deepens the story of the prequels and the tragedy of the Jedi Order. Imagine what it would do for the Clone Wars themselves. Right now, they feel like Palpatine's masterstroke of manipulation, which they were. But if we had Syfo Dyas' backstory, the wars would also feel like the tragic result of a Jedi trying to prevent the very thing he caused. That irony would make the conflict even richer. It would not just be Palpatine outsmarting everyone. It would be the Jedi playing into their own downfall. It also adds weight to the clones as characters. They were not just created in a lab, they were created because one Jedi foresaw their need. That makes them even more tragic, because their entire existence is tied to a vision that was never fully explained. It makes the idea of free will, loyalty, and destiny even messier. And that is exactly the kind of storytelling Star Wars needs more of. From a fan perspective, Syfo Dyas' story could finally bring closure to a lingering question that has been around for decades. Every time someone revisits Attack of the Clones, they hear his name and wonder what really happened. That dangling thread has always been one of the most glaring holes in the prequels. Filling it would not just be satisfying, it would feel essential. There is also the potential to connect his story to larger themes across the saga. Luke sees visions of his friends in danger and rushes to Cloud City. Anakin sees visions of Padme's death and tries to change it. Rey sees visions of herself on the throne and fears it. Every major hero wrestles with foresight. Syfo Dyas could be the cautionary tale that shows what happens when visions go too far. He would become the archetype of the Jedi who saw too much and paid the price. And let us not forget the Sith angle. Palpatine and Dooku turning Syfo Dyas' actions into their master plan is one of the most diabolical tricks in all of Star Wars. They did not just outsmart the Jedi, they used one of their own as the cover story for the greatest betrayal in galactic history. That is chilling. And it deserves to be told with the gravity it deserves. The Clone Wars TV series already proved that fans want more of these kinds of stories. When it finally touched on Syfo Dyas, people were hooked. But the story stopped short, leaving us with even more questions. A dedicated film or series could dive into those answers while also tying into the broader saga. And narratively, it would add suspense and tension to a part of Star Wars history that often gets glossed over. We know how the story ends. But watching it unfold through the eyes of a man caught between visions of doom and the manipulations of the Sith would make for a gripping tragedy. At the end of the day, Syfo Dyas is not just a forgotten Jedi. He is the keystone in the arch of the prequels. Without him, the story does not stand. And until his story is told, Star Wars will always feel like it is missing a piece of itself.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.